another exciting episode of the #1 Comics Podcast. This is the only podcast dedicated to the review and discussion of first issues. I'm your host, Jonah, and with me, as always, is Bill. Bill, how's it going?
Good, Jonah. How are you?
Good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
It has.
It always cracks me up.
Oh, man.
All right. Today, we are going to get right into it because we've got a lot to discuss with this issue. This is JLA #1 from 1997, published by DC Comics. Cover date, like I said, January of 97, so I think it probably came out, end of 96, give or take.
Right.
$1.95 was the cover price. Grant Morrison was the writer, and Howard Porter was the artist. Now, a little about Justice League before we get into the issue itself. So Justice League, or Justice League of America, or JLA for short, is what we'll probably call it going forward. Mm-hmm. They first appeared back in March of 1960. And they first appeared in a DC title called Brave and the Bold. And it began as a revival of Justice Society of America, and it featured an all-star cast of like DC's heavy hitters. And that's kind of, each incarnation of the Justice League, for the most part, has been very similar to that.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about your experience with Justice League.
Mostly from the DC animated universe.
Okay.
Like Justice League Unlimited, some of the other just like standalone, like Justice League Apocalypse.
Yep.
That sort of stuff.
All right. Not read much of the comics, though.
I did not.
Justice League back in the day.
I think the most I ever read of like Justice League was probably during the Doomsday, like Death of Superman kind of stuff.
Oh, sure. Okay.
But that was about it.
And that was a much different cast too at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Very different.
So yeah, the in contrast to other team books, these characters all had solo adventures, but then they would assemble to take down like a big threat. Mm-hmm. So it's not like X-Men, right, where the team is the book, and a lot of those characters, in my opinion, wouldn't work in a solo book.
Right.
It's very different with Justice League, and Avengers was very much the same way for Marvel, right? Where you had Captain America, Iron Man, they all had their own book, and then they had kind of their Avengers adventures together at times. But yeah, the team itself was not central to their identity like it is with a lot of other team books. Mm-hmm. The original cast featured, like I said, DC's heavy hitters. You had Green Lantern, The Flash, Superman, Batman, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, and Wonder Woman. The League allowed these characters to interact with one another, which further established the shared universe that would boost sales of those characters' individual books as well, I would imagine. Their first battle was against Starro the Conqueror, which if anyone who's listening to this or seeing this watched The Suicide Squad, as in the second Suicide Squad movie, that bad guy, the big bad at the end of that, was the villain that the Justice League had first faced, back in the 60s. After a few Brave and the Bold issues, the team did get its own title, and that first volume of JLA ran from 1960 to 1987. So that ran for a long time. There was a spin-off series called Justice League International, which had less of an American-centric focus and was more worldwide, as the name implies.
Right.
Other spin-offs like Justice League Europe, Extreme Justice, and Justice League Task Force were also created. They were all canceled. All those books were canceled around 1996, before this relaunch took place.
Yeah.
One thing about JLI that I found interesting is it featured characters that were new to the DCU from other acquired publishers.
Okay.
So like Blue Beetle, Captain Marvel from like Fawcett Comics. Blue Beetle was from Charlton Comics. After the cancellation of all of these different titles, DC wanted to revamp the League in a single title as a single team, and it was a mini-series in 96 called Justice League A Midsummer's Nightmare, which featured that classic cast. I have not read that, so I don't know whether that's good or not.
Right.
because like you, I didn't read Justice League comics back in the day.
Right.
In fact, I didn't even read this book until I stumbled across the first trade relatively cheaply and picked that up.
Okay.
And then just kind of kept going and picking up trades as I would find them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have like this entire series, but it's all in trade paperback. I don't have, this is the only single issue of this title that I have. And the only reason I bought this is because it was in the 50-cent bin.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that's cheap enough. Anyway, this book followed that Midsummer's Nightmare miniseries. This series put the focus on the original members, or at least current versions of the team. So like, your Green Lantern is not the original Green Lantern, right? You got Kyle Rayner, 90s Green Lantern in this. Mm-hmm. And as I'd mentioned before, this issue was written by Grant Morrison, who are you familiar with much other of his writing?
Yes.
Okay. What are your thoughts on Grant Morrison?
I've always liked his work. I mean, it's one of those names that's like, to me, is iconic. Yeah. Like if you see Grant Morrison's name attached to it, it's probably going to be a pretty decent read.
I sort of have, and I kind of find this with a lot of other writers whose work I really admire and respect, and I kind of have this love-hate relationship with his work.
Okay.
So some of it I absolutely adore, and then others I find overly pretentious and indulgent. I don't feel like I need a decoder ring to understand a comic book that I'm reading. Uh-huh. And with some of his stuff, not all of it, some of his stuff, I'm like, I don't know what I'm missing. Like
there's some context that's not quite there.
I'm sure we'll do the issue on this show at some point, but Final Crisis is an example of DC's big event book that was in his hands, and I'm like, this makes no fucking sense. This is dumb.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare it against Marvel's Civil War at the same time. That was so easy to follow.
Yeah.
Because it was dumbed down for people like me.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't mind intelligent comics, but I don't like comics that make me feel stupid. And sometimes Grant Morrison has that ability, is to make me feel like I am dumb.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not, a DC historian like I am not, you miss some of these little Easter eggs that he puts in there.
Yeah.
But they're not just throwaways. They're in some form or another pivotal to the story itself. And then I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know who fucking Kamandi is, so I don't know what's happening here. Right? It's that kind of thing.
Right.
And so that's kind of where, where that love-hate thing comes from. Well, most of his work I absolutely adore, though. Let's talk a little bit about where this book lands in terms of that love-hate relationship. Okay. And I guess I probably spoiled it a little bit when I said, hey, I have all the trades, because if I hated it, I wouldn't have kept going.
Right.
But let's get on to find out. And as always, we're going to start with the cover. On the cover, we've got our core cast of characters. This includes Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Aquaman. It's post Aquaman getting his hand eaten off by piranhas, so he's got the spear
hook thing. Yeah.
Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, which again it's Kyle Rayner, not Hal Jordan, and then you've got the Flash. One thing I like about this cover is I like the low perspective that the artist is giving us looking up at these characters, which really gives them this sense of being larger than life, which, let's face it, this is DC's heaviest hitters. They are larger than life, right?
Yeah.
So I really like that. Let's dive into the inside. And one thing with Grant Morrison comics, they are dense, and that's good. I mean, you have to read these things.
Yeah.
How many times did you read this to make your notes?
I read it a couple times, actually. Right. I usually most of the time I'm able to read, a lot of what you give me. I'm able to read it cover to cover. Okay, I get it. This one, I kind of went back a few times. I was like, okay, yeah. I can kind of see that now. I kind of missed that the first time around.
With a lot of the books that we'll do, I'll the last episode when we talked about Pitt, right? I read it. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to make my notes. And then as I'm making my notes, the scene by scene notes, I'm kind of looking back through it again, right? This I read like 3 times before I started even making my notes.
Yeah.
Like I just want to make sure I hadn't missed anything, and I probably still did miss something.
Right.
But yeah, I had to go back to it a few times, and not that I didn't feel like I had to go back to it. I wanted to go back to it.
Yeah.
Like it was not
Absolutely.
a chore by any means.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Inside the book, we open up in the White House in Washington, D.C. The president is asking what has happened to his superhuman escort, someone called Firehawk. But he's told that Firehawk pulled out or got sick or lost their powers. It's really unknown as to why he's not there. As they speak, darkness falls over the White House as something is blocking out the sun. That something is a massive spaceship. The men in the Oval Office, they stare up in shock and awe at as the president says, will somebody call the Justice League? Now, coincidentally, this issue dropped, 4 months after Independence Day hit theaters?
I wanted to say one of my notes in it is it's kind of ironic how the inside cover has a ad for Independence Day.
I know. I caught that too. That's really funny. Yeah. And again, I could be coincidental. I don't know. Maybe the creators pulled it out of the same idea space that some people believe in. Right. So on board a spacecraft outside of Earth's orbit, just outside, is former JLA members Ice Maiden, Metamorpho, and Nuklon, and they're wondering how this ship snuck past them. They note that there's 8 smaller objects that have detached from the mothership and are kind of coming down. Metamorpho tells the others not to worry as the big guy is on the case. And that's when we cut to see Superman flying past the Washington Monument in a fantastic piece of artwork. I don't know who owns that original piece of artwork, but man, that thing is awesome looking.
Yeah.
Superman lands on the White House lawn where a few checkmate soldiers are on alert. The smaller detached objects, they look like these kind of big silver eggs. They touch down just before Supes had gotten there, and limbs begin to emerge from inside the eggs. Superman advises everyone to stand down, really until they know what they're up against. Emerged from the eggs are 8 superhumans called the HyperClan, and their leader is a gentleman. He's a slim golden fellow who calls himself Protex. He announces that they have come to save the world. It's explained that Protex, his home planet, was destroyed by its inhabitants, leaving the superhuman survivors to wander the universe in search of new worlds. The HyperClan had traveled for possibly several million years, bringing with them a message. Wally West, a.k.a. The Flash, so he's watching and listening to Protex's message to Earth, kind of from his apartment. It's being televised, or telecast? What would be the word? Televised.
Televised, yeah.
His girlfriend reminds him, hey, you said you'd pick up my dry cleaning, which he speeds off and does very quickly. Wonder Woman, a.k.a. Diana, she is also watching the message being broadcast, as is Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter. Protex's message is one of hope and servitude. He offers the native superhuman community the opportunity to join them. Within a day, the HyperClan began making good on their word. Protex, along with Primade and Armech, they brought rains to Africa. Zenturion and Amortal brought fertile topsoil from the ocean beds and under polar ice fields. Zoom, Tronix, and Fluxus seeded the land, converting the desert wasteland into lush gardens. Celebrating the success, the HyperClan created a rainstorm of wine and honey, which I thought was really funny. A less enthusiastic Superman, who did not participate in any of this, was interviewed, and he was a little apprehensive about the so-called miracle. A crowd of onlookers, they turn on the Man of Steel, accusing him of being envious. But Protex comes into Superman's defense and says that he understands Superman's reservations and would be happy to discuss them. And if Superman wants to find him, he'll know where he can find him, which is out saving the world. And funny because I actually know people like Protex in real life with like they're like punchable golden faces, and you just want to like sock it to them.
Right.
One reporter inquires as to what's next for the heroes from Beyond the Stars. Well, to answer that question, next up is the execution of several villains. One of those villains is called Judgment. He is crying out for them to stop, but the Hyper Clan are seemingly without mercy, and they fry him. Now, if you look closely, I don't know if you caught this, but next to Judgment, having already been executed, was Dr. Doom and a Wolverine look-alike. Did you catch that?
I didn't.
Yeah,
No.
you have to go back and take a look at that.
Take a look at that.
Following the executions, several other villains went into hiding. There is a marked decrease in supercrimes because of the HyperClan's arrival. Superman, of course, denounces the executions. On board the JLA's satellite, Green Lantern and Metamorpho are squabbling. It's nearly too late when Metamorpho picks up life forms that are approaching their base. An electromagnetic pulse takes out the power on the satellite, and another explosion knocks out the backup systems. The attackers are breaching the hull, and Metamorpho calls everyone to retreat and seal off the room that they're in. Green Lantern sicks a robotic dino on the intruders, and he tells Wonder Woman that he's probably going to need some backup. This Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, he's still relatively young and inexperienced at this point, and so he definitely feels like he's punching above his weight class, which is kind of I like that take on this character. While Green Lantern and Wonder Woman take on the attackers, Metamorpho leads an escape for the others. An escape pod, rather, or let me rephrase that. Obsidian, who's one of those, exclaims that the escape pods are inoperable. So Metamorpho, using his ability of elemental transmutation, he forms a solid egg-like sphere around his teammates, and he launches himself out of the crippled satellite into space. In space, Green Lantern battles the attackers. Wonder Woman is trying to hold the crumbling satellite together, but can't. An explosion blows out the side of the satellite, and Green Lantern shields he and Wonder Woman from the blast. Metamorpho is plummeting into Earth's atmosphere with his teammates inside of him, essentially. He's unable to change his elemental structure as he begins to burn up upon re-entry. Now, in Antarctica, the HyperClan have all gotten together, and they reveal that they've actually been here before. They use their I-beams, the same I-beams that they used to execute Judgment and other villains. They use those I-beams to unearth an ancient structure from beneath the ice. We cut back to within Metamorpho, and he fills his void with a shock-absorbing liquid as he impacts the Earth like a meteor. The next day, Superman and the Flash are racing to meet up with the rest of the team. And Superman explains to Flash, and us for that matter, that Nuklon, Ice Maiden, and Obsidian were badly injured when Metamorpho had crashed into the Earth. Metamorpho himself, while not necessarily dead, was rendered inert, which sounds pretty dead to me. Flash and Superman do meet up with the others. Green Lantern and Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman, they are watching news reports. In the report, Protex claims that the Justice League seems hell-bent on starting a confrontation, and that Protex would rather they all be on the same side. Superman, he actually arrives a few seconds after the Flash does, because Flash is the fastest man alive. And Superman says that he'd spoken to Protex the night before, and he denied the HyperClan's involvement in the attack on the satellite. But Superman could sense that he was lying then, just as he's lying on TV now to people. Flash does ask if everyone is in, and Manhunter answers that there's been no response from Aquaman and no sign of Batman. Well, Batman has been there, and he calls out from the rafters above that he's here and that he's been there for an hour. Batman asks Superman if he can detect microwaves by concentrating... or let me go back. He asks Superman if he can detect microwaves. This is what I like about Grant Morrison's writing at times. Is one, I didn't necessarily feel dumb, but then I was like, oh, I'm going to look this up to see if this is like real science or comic book science.
Right.
So Batman asks Superman if he can detect microwaves. By concentrating, Superman detects increased activity on the 7 hertz level, transmitting from multiple concealed orbital sources. And he notes that the human brain operates on the 7 hertz frequency. And that's, I'm like, all right, I got to Google this. I got to see if this is like legit or some bullshit.
Right.
Mind control, Batman states. He then explains, this is a planned invasion. We're facing an unknown enemy. We don't know how many there are, and we don't know what they want. First blood goes to them, but now it's our turn. My suggestion is this. We make plans, we move fast, and we hit hard. And he ends by saying, this is war. And that's to be continued. Like I said, there is a lot that goes on. You compare this against the previous week's book, Pitt. There's so much that goes on in this issue.
There is.
Compared to what we had looked at previously. So much. What are your thoughts?
I really like this one. It was almost like it kind of reminded me in a way of, have you ever seen the show Invincible?
Yes.
So the Hyper Clan, they kind of remind me of the Viltrumites in a way, you know. We're going to show up, you know, be like, oh, we're the new, you know, protectors in town. Right. We've got you. But really what they're doing is preparing this planet for invasion.
Yep. I really think that from Invincible was probably inspired by this particular story.
I will say it probably was.
I would bet on that.
It's almost like it also, in a way, reminds me of kind of like a Bizarro Injustice storyline.
Yep.
Where instead of Superman being the bad guy who's just like, okay, we're going to get rid of all crime and I'm going to kill everybody who's a criminal. It's like he's on the opposite side of it. Okay, yeah, I get your point. They're criminals, but no, we don't do that here.
Right. We still have our due process. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so you dug the issue.
Yes.
Perfect.
Very much so.
Like I said, I've always had this kind of like love-hate relationship with Grant Morrison's work. I liked his new X-Men. It was decent. Doom Patrol was cool. Seven Soldiers was good. I loved his All-Star Superman. I liked his Batman Rest in Peace. I think I probably finally understood it by the second or third time that I read it. His work on 52. I love the whole 52 series. Every bit of that. His Animal Man's good. The Final Crisis I really didn't care for. And then there's some other stuff of his that I probably have not read, right? I know I haven't read everything. As far as where this book lands, like you, I freaking loved it. This is a book I've probably read, even like I said, in preparation for this episode, I read this book probably like 3 times in one sitting, and then I kind of perused it a 4th time when I was making my notes.
Yeah.
And I've probably read it a half dozen times before that in trade. So I really like it. I mean, the very first page drops us right into a conversation. And, I think I've mentioned that before. I love that.
Yeah.
Because I like it when a scene starts in the middle of something and you're kind of playing catch up a little bit, or it's still, you don't feel like you're missing any part of it.
Yeah.
But if you think about, you walk into a room or you turn on a TV, you're not necessarily catching something from the beginning.
Exactly.
Right? You're catching it in the middle at times.
Yeah.
And so he is one of the few writers, him, Gail Simone, there's a few others that I can think of that do that really well.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that writing tactic. The alien ship over the White House, like I said, it's a cool visual, albeit it's very Independence Day-ish. The title of this issue is Them, which does refer to the HyperClan, and while they look almost like rejected characters from like Malibu's like Ultraverse line or something, right? There's definitely more to meets the eye with the group. Now, Bill, have you read any of the other issues of this?
I haven't.
No. Okay. Do you want me to spoil it for you? Do you want to know what these guys are?
You can, yeah.
Okay.
Because I plan on borrowing the trade from you at some point.
I will loan you the trade. Remind me to bring it the next time we get together to record.
Yeah.
Okay. If you are listening to this or watching this and you've not read this yet, and you do not want to be spoiled, cover your ears for like the next 20 seconds. And I think if you once I tell you what it is, I think you'll be like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So another few seconds to let people. Okay, here we go. Here's a spoiler. Think about it like this. These different characters display abilities like flight, super speed, shape-shifting, heat vision, and more. Which JLA member that you can think of that is kind of the Swiss Army knife of the team like that?
Martian Manhunter.
Bing, bing, bing. These are Martians.
Okay.
That's the big reveal that comes in the next. I'm not sure if it's issue 2 or issue 3. They're revealed to be Martians. Zone Zor was a really big clue to that as well, because that compound that they unearth at the end, and they call it that. I mean, think about like Martian Manhunter's real name is John Jones, spelled very similarly.
Yeah.
And so I like that, because when I was reading this, I forgot about that. Even when I got to the end, it wasn't until I reread the trade before I picked up this single. I reread the trade a few months ago and had forgotten that that's what it was until I got to that page, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot they're Martians.
No.
So anyway, spoiler over. A lot of that information that we're getting on the HyperClan in this issue, and their actions, it's all through or biased through the media, which I think is very cool.
Yeah.
And really, that's something that is even topical today, depending on
absolutely
which side of the spectrum you fall on in terms of, any number of current events, right?
Yeah.
Who's the aggressor? Who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy?
Yeah.
It depends on what media outlet you're getting your information from.
Yeah.
When I think it's funny because you get all of these blips of them through the media, which is painting them in a particular light. And then when you see them in person, or when we kind of catch up with them in person, it's when they're executing these supervillains.
Right.
And you see them in a different light. So there's like how the media portrays them, or how they're portraying themselves to the media.
Yeah.
And then when you don't have that media filter, it's like, oh man, these guys are hardcore. They're probably not good guys.
Yeah.
Even though they think they're doing the world a favor or whatever, or that's how they want us to feel. But it's a very cool juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else did I have noted in here? I do like the brief scenes that we get with some of the team in this new incarnation. The scene with Metamorpho, I mean, holy shit, that is horrific.
Yeah.
That is just so horrible to look at.
I will say this, and I don't know if it's just because it's Grant Morrison, but I didn't think DC went this hard back in '97.
I think they did. I mean, they were turning. I think a lot of comics were kind of entering that next phase, right?
Yeah.
Getting darker, more gritty. I mean, you have to think, because this was. Let's see. Marvel was probably on the verge of declaring bankruptcy, right? And so they're probably and they kind of followed suit a little bit with their Marvel Knights, which kind of brought them out of bankruptcy. Yeah. But DC, I think, especially bringing in somebody like Grant Morrison, I think they were kind of the ones spearheading this. Yeah. And yeah, it was definitely not like picking up an '80s issue of Justice League, I'm sure. Right.
Well, and just, I mean, we've read a few kind of offshoot comics of Justice League, but never being like a big fan of DC or Justice League before. If I picked this one up, I'd probably continue the series.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I'd picked this up back in 96, I would have been all over it.
Well, not only that, but we talk a lot about ones that would be like a good jumping off point for you if you've never read anything before.
Right.
And I think we all know who Wonder Woman, Superman, Green Lantern, Batman, we all know who those people are.
Yeah, that's the benefit of having a first issue like that, is you don't have to introduce anybody.
Yeah.
And so you can get away, because if you think about with this issue in particular, with the main cast, you get a good bit of Superman and Green Lantern, but then several of the others barely make an appearance in this issue, but that's okay because you know who they are.
Right.
Aquaman doesn't even appear.
Right.
But you know he's on the team because he's on the cover.
Yeah.
But he doesn't even show up in this issue.
Yeah.
Batman, he's in like 2 pages at the very end, right?
Yeah.
And Batman's few pages really summarize why I love Batman as a character, especially when he's used in this fashion. I like Batman, and I don't know if this is going to sound good or bad. I like Batman more as not as a prop, but as just a force of nature versus an actual character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to get to know Batman too well. I like him kind of on the fringe. And so when he shows up, and it's funny because he's been there for an hour, but what he's doing is he's testing out a new gadget that masks his heartbeat, and he's literally just spying on his teammates for an hour to see if they notice him up there or if they can detect him up there.
Right.
And they don't, so he's just fucking sitting up there eavesdropping on him. Superman didn't even know he was there because he comes down and he's like kind of whispers to him, he's like, "Oh, my gadget worked." You know what I mean? Like, because Superman was like, "Oh, I didn't detect your heartbeat." And he's like, "Oh, good, my gadget worked."
Yeah.
And so I love that Batman, and I think Grant does Batman probably better, in my opinion. Grant's Batman is better than 85% of other DC writers' Batman.
Yeah.
And so like we were saying, is one of the benefits of this being a first issue and you get DC's biggest hitters is you can do away with the origins. Like, you don't have to retell any of that. You don't have to do introductions. Everyone knows who these characters are. You just get right into it. And really, that's what Morrison does. He just gets right into it. And so much happens over the course of the pages in this. Mm-hmm. And again, it's happening very fast because, like, you know, in one page, the HyperClan has seeded a desert and grown crops and then made it rain honey and wine or whatever.
Yeah, it was like manna from heaven.
That happens in a page.
Yeah.
Like, you give that to less experienced writers, and that's 4 or 5 pages of talking heads.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If memory serves me correctly, comic art in the mid to late 90s wasn't very good.
Right.
Especially, and again, I wasn't a big DC guy back in the 90s. It was mostly Marvel. Which, as a weird aside, I'm buying more DC comics today than I am Marvel comics. I think DC is just better right now.
Yeah.
But Howard Porter's art on this, I think, is an exception because this art is really good.
Yeah.
And it stands up well today. You can't say that about a lot of the other 90s comics, even some of the other ones we've taken a look at.
Yeah.
This really stands up today, and it doesn't feel like you're reading a comic from 1996 necessarily.
Exactly.
It feels like you could be reading this. You could just pick this up today, brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the art here. It's kinetic. He's got really cool dynamic angles. John Della's the inker. He's fantastic. And yeah, he's really enhancing Porter's work on this. I can only imagine how dense and probably specific a Grant Morrison script is.
Yeah.
And so I've got to feel for these artists or give it to these artists for being able to convey his words in such a concise fashion.
Right.
I can't imagine it being very easy at times to translate into art.
Oh, I'm sure it's not.
So,
yeah.
Let's talk about what came next. Any other thoughts on the issue? I mean, other than we loved it, we'd pick up more of it.
Yeah. I will agree with you that I think I've probably gone back and read more like omnibuses or trades of DC stuff lately than I have any of the like previous Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
You know, Injustice is a good example. because that was one I couldn't put down, and this reminds me a lot of it.
I think between like DC's Absolute Universe that they've got going right now, their current JLA Unlimited, Justice Society, because a lot of these relaunched with new number one, so it was really easy for me to get back into them.
Right.
And yeah, I'm picking up. Aquaman's another example of that. We're getting a new Superman number one soon, a new Batman number one soon. I'm sure as shit gonna buy those.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting, not only am I getting more DC right now, I'm enjoying reading more DC. I think DC is just a stronger output right now than what Marvel Comics is giving us. I've got a lot of issues with the Marvel Comics that I'm reading these days. There are some gems, but there's just so many turds in there. I don't know. I don't have the answers, but they've got to change something at some point. I would think Marvel does. But anyway, I'm sure we'll talk more about that down the road. As far as what came next with this particular issue, or this series rather, it ran for like 10 years. And it ran for 126 issues.
Wow.
And like I said, I've got about all of them in trade. There might be one or two of the later years that I'm missing. Now, despite some fill-in writers here or there, Morrison, he wrote like the first 40 issues himself. Following Morrison, other rotating writers came in like Joe Kelly, Chris Claremont, Kurt Busiek, Jeff Johns. So you're getting like A-list writers on an A-list title, which is really how it should be.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a problem with Marvel right now, is they don't have a lot of A-list talent, so you're not getting A-list writers on A-list books.
Yeah.
JLA was a success, becoming DC's best-selling book for years, which really a series like that should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A second volume of the series came out in 2006. That ran for 60 issues. I've not read any of that, admittedly. In 2011, DC's New 52 did away with all that previous continuity, and they wanted to start fresh. Across the board, it was a line-wide revamp, canceling all of its previous titles, and it debuted 52 new series, which seems like a ridiculous amount of titles.
Right.
I think it was like over the course of a year or whatever. And that actually was my clue to kind of dip out of comics at that time. Like once they did that, I was like, I'm done. And I kind of bowed out. So I didn't read any of I've got a few new 52 titles that I've just picked up because they were like 50 cents a piece.
Right.
But I haven't read any of that JLA. Now, nothing lasts forever, of course. And another line-wide reboot came from DC, which it was called Rebirth. And I think it took place after Convergence, if I'm not mistaken. And that was back in 2016. Now, unlike what the New 52 did, Rebirth restored the DC universe to its pre-New 52 form. So they're like, hey, all that continuity that we told you to forget about, well, now we're going to go back to that, and now you can forget about this New 52 stuff.
Right.
And so there was Rebirth. It did incorporate some aspects of the New 52, but a lot of it was kind of like it was picking and choosing, cherry picking the best of both worlds, really, or kind of what was maybe easiest for them. So there was a title called Justice League that ran for 43 issues from 2016 to 2018. There was a title called Justice League of America, and that ran from 2017 to 2018 for 29 issues. I have a little bit of both, and again, just picked them up super cheap.
Yeah.
I haven't read them yet. I don't know if I want to just kind of start reading them or if I want to like try and fill in the rest of the series before I give it a go. I was out of comics at the time that relaunch happened or Rebirth happened. But honestly, having a Justice League and a Justice League of America title running at the same time probably would have confused me. Yeah. And even going back and trying to find back issues, it confuses me.
Well, it's kind of like what Avengers did with like Avengers West Coast and stuff like that.
Right. Now, in 2018, we did see yet another volume of Justice League launch, and that ran for 75 issues.
Nice.
And as well, I never picked up any of that. But that's not to say that I won't, because I'm becoming a Justice League fan.
Now, did Grant Morrison continue kind of working on Justice League throughout the years, or did he?
On which one? On Justice League?
on like any of the future Justice League titles?
No, I don't. No, I don't recall Grant Morrison going back to any of the Justice League titles. He did a lot with, or most of his stuff was on like Batman books.
Okay,
it's like Batman and Robin.
Right.
I'm trying to think of during the new. I think he was still doing Batman and Robin in the New 52.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall, because of him being Grant Morrison and of the story he was telling, I think that was like the only title that kind of didn't change continuity and kind of like kept its own thing going.
Yeah.
I could be mistaken about that, but if I recall correctly, that's how that worked out. But yeah, I don't recall him working on any additional Justice League books.
Okay.
He is coming back to Batman this fall.
Wow.
So he'll be coming back to do some more Batman.
Nice.
Now, 2023 to 2024 saw the team go on hiatus until just at the end of 24, we saw the launch of Justice League Unlimited. And I did pick that up. And love it so far.
Yeah.
It's really good. I'm sure we'll talk about the first issue at some point because it's cool. And Avengers, I think, again, with these companies, one does one, the other one kind of, mimics it, copies it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And the kind of the concept now is, like, if you're a superhero in the DCU, you've got your Justice League card, and we can call on you if the mission needs you.
Right.
And so you've got this, like, you do have your core cast, but then you'll have an issue where they just bring in like all of these like crazy random people to fight some big threat.
Yeah.
Because their power set meshes with it or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so it's a very cool series. I really like that aspect of it. Like I said, they did kind of the same thing with Avengers. Mm-hmm. They had it was like a 5-issue series called Avengers Assemble. Very much the same thing. I actually wish they would have continued that because I thought that was better than the actual Avengers book.
Oh, okay.
At least conceptually. I mean, I love the idea of you've got this just massive toy box of characters that you can play with and bring in, tell whatever story you want to tell. I mean, as a writer, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd like to see something like that come back on the Marvel side. I was largely out of comics when this issue hit stands. By 96, I wasn't until the mid 2000s when I kind of got back into it. And that's when I started tracking down the trades. I completely missed out on the second volume in 2006, as I said. I love this series. I will loan you the trades. You can read it. They're all very good. A lot of it, I think, was it Tower of Babel? Like, a lot of it's been converted into, some of those animated movies that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
So, it's really good. I'm trying to think if I had anything else I wanted to mention. Any other final thoughts from you?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. Yeah, I used to not be a Justice League fan. I used to not even be a DC fan. But because of Grant Morrison and because of the series, that changed a lot of that for me. And I think this is an excellent first issue.
Yeah.
It's a great jumping on point. If anyone wants to go back and you can find this issue, I'm sure in back bins somewhere, pick it up on trade. It's so good.
All right.
All right. Well, that's going to do us for another episode here. Thank you guys, everyone, for joining us. Be sure to check us out, YouTube, part of the Field of Geeks Network. You can also find us on Facebook at the #1 Comics Podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe. What's the other one? Refresh?
Share.
Like, subscribe,
comment.
share.
Comment below if you've read this one and if you liked it, or if there's any of Grant Morrison's other work you'd like us to look into.
Yeah, if you got something nice to say, leave a comment. If it's shitty,
don't bother. We won't read it anyway.
Nope. But appreciate it. Special thanks to everyone at the Field of Geeks Network for helping make this happen. Thanks to Raven X for the awesome intro theme song.
Absolutely.
And we will see you guys next time.